Genesis 1 is probably the most important chapter when it comes to the creation-evolution debate. It makes it literally impossible to reconcile evolution and creation as taught in the Bible, as the Bible talks about the creation week and not the creation billions of years. Although that doesn't stop a lot of Christians from not believing what God says and trying to squeeze in evolution where it does not belong. Genesis 1 is also filled with interesting stuff which, if you read for the first time, you might not notice. It sets out the plot for what is going to happen in the rest of the Bible, and it also creates important doctrines that are going to be used later in the Bible. So if you are ready with some popcorn in hand, we can start with the very first video where we properly read through the Bible. This is the first chapter of Genesis. God created the heavens, the earth, and everything that lives. He made humankind in his image and gave them charge over the earth. So as you can see from this quick summary, Genesis talks about the origin of everything. And you will see that the story we will read in Genesis is much different from the story you would read in your science textbooks. But for more on that, go watch some creation-evolution debates. For now, let's just focus on what the passages say. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Already in the very first sentence of the Bible, we have a sentence that means a lot more than it may seem at face value. Here, God creates time, space, and matter, and he creates all three of these things in the correct order. He creates time with in the beginning, he then creates space with the heaven, and he then creates matter with the earth. Note that just like the Trinity of God, we have three things here that are needed for existence. Also note that all three of these things need to be created in this exact order. If we have space before time, when will we put the space? If we have matter before space, where will we put this matter? This is a very important concept to understand, and I feel like it is an oversight by atheists when they talk about the Big Bang Theory. What is also really cool is that we have a trinity of trinities included in this creation. Time consists of past, present, and future. Space consists of length, width, and height. And matter consists of solids, fluids, and liquid. And matter consists of solids, liquids, and gas. Also, what's very important to notice here is that heaven is singular. This is important as the heaven will be broken up into three firmaments later in this chapter. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So in this verse, we are already starting with what I believe to be foreshadowing. Here, God starts off with the dark, empty world, and he transforms it into a perfect creation. The same thing will be happening throughout the Bible. Adam and Eve, by sinning against God, recreated this dark, empty world, and God immediately starts to transform it back into the perfect creation. Although this is much easier said than done when humans have some say over it. Also, the fact that God's Spirit is moving on the face of the water tells me that God is not in the creation itself. He is outside of the creation. I also believe that there is foreshadowing in the fact that God created this universe in 6 days and a day of rest. God will be working 6,000 years again to recreate this perfect world, and after the 6,000 years we will be resting for another 1,000 years. Why the random number 6,000? Well, it's because a day is like 1,000 years for God, and 1,000 years like a day. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So here we see God creating light out of nothing at all. If we read a bit further, we will see that the sun, moon, and stars are made on day 4, which means that the light created on day 1 is not the sun or the stars. So from this day until day 4, God will be supplying the light by himself. Just like the first sentence, I think that here it could be analogous to God creating physics and mathematics, since he created the electromagnetic spectrum and waves. Also here, it could be some foreshadowing that God will be one day supplying light by himself to a dark world again. And he does this through the law to get people to paradise. And then after a few thousand years, he will be supplying a more permanent solution, i.e. the sun, to give some permanent light to this earth. This sun would die for our sins and get us from our sinful world into heaven. Also notice how the King James Bible uses the words the first day and not a first day. This to me confirms that this first day was a literal 24-hour day, and not billions of years like some people like to teach. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day." So in these few verses, we have the creation of the firmament. Now, just from this passage, you might be thinking that the firmament is land, dividing the waters from the waters. Or it could be some solid object hanging in the sky with the oceans below it and some water on top of it, much like the dome of a flat earth, perhaps. But this is not the case. As you will see when we read a little further into this chapter, the firmament is the air where the birds fly in. So the firmament is not solid, it's just air.
Breathe air!
Although I do believe that the waters above the firmament was something like an ice canopy around the earth, but I won't go into any detail about this. Also, just notice that the firmament was called heaven. This is going to be very important later on. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered unto one place, and let the dry land appear," and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas, and God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, and herb yielding seed, and a fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth," and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind, and God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. So on this day, we have God creating two things, the land and the plants. The fact that he creates two things on this day is very weird, because on the other days he only creates one thing, except again for day 6. Now, this is very interesting because this could suggest some parallels between the days, but more on that on the next day. Also notice that the earth came up from underneath the water. This is very interesting because I think that all of the excess water that was above the earth before it came out from under the water now went under the earth. I think it's most likely that this water would then be used by God again in Noah's day to flood the earth. And then after the flood, with some unknown process, God would just put that water back underneath the earth. This would then be an explanation for why we have so much water under the crust of the earth. Some of the flood water, however, would then just stay on the earth and form oceans, because I do think that before the flood there wasn't as much water on the earth as there is today. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth," and it was so. And God made the two greater lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Now, something that I actually noticed while writing the script is that after the first 3 days, the days follow on what happened in the previous 3 days. On the first day, God creates light. However, on the fourth day, God creates the sun, moon, and stars, which are light-emitting objects. I believe that this is actually a bit of foreshadowing again. God prepares his people and the earth for the coming Messiah for the first 3,000 years. After that, he then fulfills his promise for the next 3,000 years. Also notice how the space where the sun, moon, and stars are placed are called the firmament of heaven. Now, this is very important because this creates an idea which I think is really cool. There are 3 firmaments that divide the heaven. So we have one heaven which encompasses everything that's in existence, and then the 3 firmaments dividing everything that's in existence. The first firmament is the air where the birds fly, so everything on earth would live in the first firmament. The second firmament would then be outer space, where all of the stars and the sun and the moon are. And then the third firmament would be the place where God lives, the place we usually think of as heaven. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven." And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters waters in the sea, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Okay, so here we have that parallel again that we saw in the previous day. God creates the firmament on day 2, and then he fills that firmament on the fifth day. Also notice how the animals on this day were created from the water, because the waters were divided on day 2. The fact that the birds were created from the water as well, for me, adds to this parallel, because the air was constructed from the waters. So the birds have to be constructed from the waters. While I was reading this passage, I actually saw for the first time that whales were pointed out in this passage, and I wondered what the significance was of pointing out whales in this verse. Now, although I couldn't really find anything solid, here is what I'm thinking so far. I think these creatures were merely mentioned in this verse to draw people's attention to the fact that the whales were created by God. These are some significant animals that have lived practically from the beginning, and so all people of all time would know these creatures, and then through that could associate them with God. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creatures after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good." Now, on this day, we have God creating two things again. He creates land animals and humans. So again, we have the parallel of day 3 and day 6. On day 3, the earth was created, and on day 6, the earth was filled. Now, notice how these animals were created from the earth and not from the water. That's really interesting to me, because it basically just confirms this parallel where, since the ground was created on day 3, all animals created on day 6 have to be created from the ground. Again, I was wondering what the significance was of mentioning cattle again in this passage, and I don't have an answer for that again. I think much like the whale, it could be an animal which a lot of people have dealt with, and so mentioning in this passage would create that connection between them and God, making you think about God more. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the earth, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Now, in these two verses, God creates mankind. Notice how it says he created them male and female, and not asexual, pansexual, transgender, non-gender, neogender, more than double gender. I don't know what people have thought of, but we don't have any of that. We just have male and female. Now, when I saw this passage for the first time, I was also wondering what the significance was of God creating mankind in his image. Well, I just think that this means that we have similar attributes and personality to God. We like to create and invent. We like to rule and have power. We love and we plan. I mean, there's a lot more attributes that we can connect from humans to God, but I think you get the point. Also, why doesn't it say in my likeness and in my image? Why does it say us and our? Well, the potential reason for this could be the Trinity. Now, I know that could sound like some kind of marketing scheme, but I'm not associated with any such scheme. Just like God is a 3-in-1, he is an our and an us. He is an us and a me at the same time. Don't ask me how that works. I don't know either. Anyway, I think this was just a little bit of foreshadowing spice that God threw in to make us wonder a bit about what's going to be coming in future books. This also to me resonates with that Trinity in Trinity thing we saw in verse 1. So again, what we see here is something that might seem very insignificant, but which is actually much deeper and much more thoughtful than you might think. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." Now this verse is actually very important, because here God gives us dominion over the world. He gives us the responsibility to look after the earth and to care for it. He does this so that he is able to rest on the 7th day, looking back on everything that he has created in the 6 days. A lot of people think that this verse gives us permission to do whatever we like with the earth, but that is not the case. We are only made responsible to look after the earth, even though we have dominion over it. And to be frank, we are not doing a great job at the moment keeping this responsibility. And God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb yielding seed, which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat," and it was so. Okay, so these two verses are actually quite interesting ones, because at first it might seem like these verses have no significant meaning at all. But actually there's a very big complication in these two verses. It basically tells us that everything that was living on the earth was vegetarian, because the seed and the fruit were made as meat for us. In other words, the fruit and the seed were our food. Now, if you think that an animal like a lion with its fierce teeth can never be vegetarian, then I want you to go think about the panda bear. They are vegetarian, so why do they have these massive teeth? I mean, look at it. Those puppies can do real damage. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good, and the evening and the morning were the sixth day. And then finally, with this verse, we end off our discussion on Genesis 1. Just notice here that at the end of the sixth day of creation, God looks back on everything that he has created, not just what he created on day 6. So I think this signifies that God is happy with everything that he has created, and that everything was very good. So there you have it, my brothers and sisters. A chapter that at first glance seems not that significant actually has some very big impacts in the rest of the Bible, and actually how we understand how the world works. There were a lot of things I only noticed while writing this script, and I hope that I gave you some interesting ideas about this chapter to go think about. Now, if you want to know more about Adam, Eve and the sixth day of creation, then watch the video on screen right now. Thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers!